India wants to become the top manufacturing alternative to China, and some analysts think it is poised to do so. As companies shift away from Beijing, India could rise to prominence, but it first needs to lower taxes and improve its own supply chain to dethrone Vietnam, which offers low labor cost and the ability to manufacture electronics. Sectors that require intensive manual labor and have low profit margins, such as apparel manufacturing, are shining in Vietnam. But US tech giants are increasingly bringing parts to their supply chains to the South Asian country. Apple told component suppliers it will source batteries from Indian factories for its upcoming iPhone 16. The company has weighed expanding operations in India since 2016, when CEO Tim Cook visited Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Google is also set to begin Pixel phone production in India by the second quarter of this year. Now, let's bring in Josh Mahoney. He is Chief Market Analyst at Scope Markets, and he joins us now live from London. Thank you for being with us. So first, why are US companies, but also not just US, companies all over the world, shifting away from China?
Well, China, of course, really led the way in terms of low-cost manufacturing, and it felt like that dominance was going to be very difficult to shift. But over time, we have seen wages increase, which has really diminished some of their competitiveness in the field. That being said, I think, one of the big sort of things that happened came under Donald Trump, and this is what's so particularly notable given the fact that we could see him back in power very soon. And that is that he really lifted those tariffs and levies from products coming from China. That meant that suddenly these different manufacturing companies had to try and diversify away from the country. And given the fact that COVID-19 then came into play, where we had particularly harsh lockdowns in the country, really did point towards the need to diversify away from China. It doesn't necessarily mean that people won't continue to produce in China, but that needs to focus on China as the be-all and end-all in terms of production really has changed over the course of the past 4 years.
Right, so what role is India playing in all of this, and why? I mean, its economy is doing pretty well. Is this thanks to its macroeconomic fundamentals, or are there other reasons as well, for instance, political reasons?
Yeah, India has always been sort of a step behind China. If you look at the size of the market, it always promised to be a massive future market for any big company. And this essentially appears to be sort of fast forwarding that move. Certainly, we do have relative stability from a political standpoint. They have a very strong educational system, and they're perfectly positioned sort of halfway between Europe and the Middle East, and on the other side, the likes of Southeast Asia. So certainly India in particular does carry favor for producers. But I think that the key thing here is that China was always attractive because getting into it also allowed access to millions of sort of burgeoning middle class consumers. The same can be said for India. So it's a key market within itself. That can't necessarily be said to the same extent for Vietnam.
Right, and now the question is, though, whether India will be able to dethrone Vietnam at this point, as we saw Vietnam as a seriously low labor cost in certain sectors, such as manufacturing and electronics, not only. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, one of the things that Vietnam has done particularly well is offer incentives for firms to come in. 10% tax on Samsung in Vietnam, that's 25% in China. It's not necessarily the same kind of position in India. It is relatively favorable, but ultimately I think that the key thing here is that Vietnam is relatively cheap in terms of labor. It's politically stable, and it's offering strong tax incentives for companies going there. Whereas if you look at India, it offers the benefit of being a huge market unto itself. So certainly there's benefits for being in both countries. And I think that if you look at, say, Vietnam, that's better placed to serve Southeast Asia from a sort of location standpoint, whereas India sort of straddles things a little bit more and is more sort of geared towards being able to provide to both Asia, but also the likes of Europe and the Middle East.
Josh Mahoney, thank you very much for being with us today.